After his defeat of Ra's al Ghul, Batman finds himself going up against his toughest adversary yet, the Joker, an agent of chaos hell-bent on bringing Gotham into total anarchy. This is The Dark Knight. Hi, I'm Anthony, your host.
And I'm Mark, your other host.
And this is Buddy Movies, the place where buddies talk about movies.
Nerd.
I just wanted to show people what my mask looks like. I'm not going to wear it the whole episode, but this is what it looks like. I'm very proud of it. Got it several years ago. I think it looks great. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work well for the podcast. I'm going to take it off, but I just wanted to show you how dedicated a fan I am of this movie and of Ledger's Joker. So there we go.
Where are the other drugs going?
Where are all the drugs going?
I watched that video. That was something.
That was funny. I love all those videos. Pete Holmes is hilarious.
Yeah.
He has this other bit where he fires the X-Men.
Okay. Yeah.
He plays Professor X, and he's like, "I'm firing you." And it's like, what? Why? And he goes through basically the crappy X-Men at first, but then he started getting into the A-listers, and he was like with Wolverine, he was like, well, your skeleton's made of metal, and the main person we fight, his power is to control metal, so yeah, you're just useless.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's funny. I like it. I'm gonna mute this. Otherwise I'll forget. Where are the drugs going?
Where are the other drugs going? Rachel. Well, welcome to the season finale of Buddy Movies, the season 3 finale of Buddy Movies. Third, we got through 3.
We've got through 3 seasons.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey. We started all the way back. Let's see, when was that? We started with Mad Max Fury Road way back on May 11, and before that we did the Jurassic Park Facebook Live on May 3. So way back in early May, we started the season. It's
wow.
This is
our longest season yet.
Yeah.
I think we're doing 22 episodes that turned out to be or something like that.
Yeah. It's spanning almost 5 months. So this is, yeah, that's a lot. But here we are in our final episode this season, covering Dark Knight, the second chapter in Nolan's Dark Knight Trilogy. And, I texted you this beforehand. I don't even really want to spend any time on opening banter. I want to get into this movie because I think, I know I have quite a bit to say, and I'm sure you do too, because this is a very, I know how big of a Batman fan you are, clearly. You're literally wearing the mask, and people saw beforehand in my brief shot, I'll still show it here. I have the Joker mask too. So obviously, we're pretty big fans. We're pretty big fans of this, and you've got the shirt too. We're pretty big fans of Batman and the Dark Knight. At least of this character. So, oh boy,
should I leave it on for the whole show?
You can if you want. Go for it. If it's not too hot.
No, it's not hot at all.
Yeah, I'd say go for it. So I don't. I've told you my movie list before, but The Dark Knight is currently number 2, my all-time movie list of favorite movies. The Inception's number 1, Dark Knight is number 2. So that I want to put that out up front for people that this is my number 2 favorite movie all time going into it, just so people know what they're getting into here. So the Dark Knight,
Batman movie.
Oh, I really think
it is. If it was a Batman movie, but it's not.
We'll get into that here. It's in the title itself here. Here we go. So, The Dark Knight, released July 18, 2008, written by Christopher and Jonathan Nolan, his brother, and directed by Christopher Nolan. Nominated for 8 Oscars and won 2. One was for Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role, the posthumous award for the great Heath Ledger, and also it won for Best Achievement in Sound Editing. And just some of the other nominations, it got nominated for Best Cinematography, Visual Effects, Art Direction, and I believe Sound Mixing as well. So
the sound editing was pretty amazing on this because I was as I do with most of the movies we do, I watch them on my phone, which I know isn't the best way to actually watch them, but I end up with my headphones on and I can hear the sound a lot better that way. And there were a lot of really good elements in this, like even like the opening, I didn't realize it, but there was just like this nice creepy noise at the very beginning where you're zooming in on, the back of what we found out later on was the Joker. So there was a lot of good sound stuff in this movie.
As in, like, was it part of the actual score, or was it was it part of the actual score that you heard?
Yeah, it was part of the music. It was done on purpose. Okay. Like they just had different sounds like layered on top of each other, and it was just like, wow, okay, there's a lot more going on here than I remember, at least sound wise. Like even hearing the glass shattering at different points for certain things going on, and the fight scene where towards the end of the movie with in the building where Batman's saving the hostages because they've made the hostages look like the doctors and the doctors look like the hostages,
right?
Or the doctors look like the criminals. So it's like, there's a lot of really good stuff all throughout, and the sound was on point for this movie.
Yeah. I wanted to put this also out there on IMDb's top rated movies. This is number 4 currently on the list. 9.0 out of 10 stars from 2.4 million reviews. So it's number 4 also on IMDb. So very, very highly rated. And
why do you put so much weight into those things?
I really
it's just
like
this weird thing because I know.
I know. I do give credits to IMDb. I don't know. I really just do. I feel like even though they are user generated, IMDb is still the number one, movie source for everything essentially. And so I do put more weight into IMDb. So that's why I threw that out there. I do put more weight into IMDb just because of the amount of the wealth of information that it has, and because it is the number one movie source on the internet. So. Box office wise, it grossed just over $1 billion, 1.006 on a $185 million budget. And this was, at the time, the first comic book movie to ever cross $1 billion, which was a big deal way back then. Now it's it's nothing. But back then, this was a huge deal back then.
Because this is the same year as Iron Man, right?
It was the same year as Iron Man. Okay, yep. Yeah. So this is even, before shared universes and the MCU and everything. This was back when comic book movies were they were very hit or miss. And I was trying to remember, between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, was there any comic book movie that was released? Because if there was,
Possibly X-Men. I don't know.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, X-Men Last Stand would have been 2006. Okay. So yeah. So there were superhero, comic book movies out there, but they were very very hit or miss. And at this point, this was Nolan. He had done Batman Begins in 2005, and this was his second entry into it. And
the Elektra movie came out at that time too, which is.
And I know the Catwoman movie came out like in the mid 2000s somewhere, but I've heard that's one's terrible. The one with Halle Berry. I haven't
seen it, but it just looked terrible.
Yeah. So
that was 2004. So it was before, but still.
Yeah, so this movie came out right when comic book movies were starting to actually become legitimate again in a way. Not that the X-Men movies weren't really weren't good or anything, but this really, no one reinvented the comic book genre in many ways with Batman Begins, and he really furthers that in this story, in my opinion. So first, I want to get into why this is such a good movie. Why this is, in my opinion, the best superhero movie of all time. I hold by that statement. I stand by that statement. Why this is the best superhero?
Even hold it better than Spider-Man 2?
Yes.
Even better than Spider-Man 2?
I would say yes. Yes. Why this is the best superhero movie of all time. because it's not the great practical effects, like, you know, actually blowing up a building for the hospital explosion scene, or flipping a semi truck, literally flipping a semi truck. It's not even Heath Ledger's masterful, iconic, unforgettable performance as the Joker. It's not even all of that. It's really what it boils down to is just the writing in this movie. So there are several ways of how it accomplishes this. First, it's how the film captures themes and subject matter that accurately illustrate how easily humans can fall. And by that, I mean, you know, this is exemplified in the the Batman Joker interrogation scene. That's now a very famous scene.
See, their morals, their code, it's a bad joke. Dropped at the first sign of trouble. They're only as good as the world allows them to be. I'll show you. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve.
So, and this really leads into what I think is a golden rule for screenwriting and real life just in general, that true character of anybody is revealed whenever that character or person is put under immense pressure or boxed into a corner. And we see this play out time and time again in this movie, especially with Batman, how the Joker knows his weaknesses and pins him down and forces him into corners. And then the same is done for people, many of the police force, the people, the actual police officers that are put in tough situations, and they act in ways that you don't think they would act, because they actually, when it boils down to, they have family in jeopardy or there's money involved, and they don't act, you know, morally like you think they would, because they're deep down, they're still human beings, and human beings can be easily moved or swayed when it comes to money or, you know, family or things of that nature. And so, you know, and this, you know, this is also just a flat out relevant movie that continues to be relevant time and time again, years down the road. It's why this movie still holds up. It's because we saw this even play out during COVID last year. Remember whenever there was a toilet paper shortage, whenever everyone was panicking because of, you know, COVID and shutdowns, you had people literally fighting.
Were?
Oh, maybe they still are. But fighting over toilet paper because of the shortage. And it's just like, whenever people get dire for things, whenever things start getting very serious, the real truth of how people are actually comes out. And this movie really, really plays to that and shows us just how easily people unravel.
Yeah.
How easily, it's kind of scary when you think about it, because when watching this movie, and this all kind of speaks to how grounded this film was actually made as far as its aesthetic style. Like, this movie, it feels like a historical event because it's so grounded in reality, just with not even just the practical effects and everything, but the story itself. It feels like an event that could have happened and can happen because of how it's written and the characters involved, and how there's no, you know, end of the world stakes. It's all contained. This movie has low stakes, or I should say, it has local stakes, where basically there's no end of the world climactic event that you find in a lot of superhero movies. It's contained to one city, but the stakes still feel incredibly high, even though it's just affecting really one city. It's just Gotham. And I think that makes it even more high stakes, because when you're dealing with an end of the world event, you know, deep down, the world's not actually going to perish. Like, whatever this life-changing event is, it's probably not going to happen. The world's not going to end in a movie. Okay. Yeah. But with this, things could have actually happened in this, and you genuinely don't know what's going to happen because of the fact that they are local stakes. And so I think that's just a fantastic, a brilliant move on the writing side.
That's exactly what I said about Spider-Man last week. So, I do like that because it does make it more contained, more character-driven, and you do get to see. But yeah, the end of the world thing is just like too high and too much. I mean, even X-Men was already at the point where everything they did seemed to be world-shattering. Like the first X-Men movie had that end of the world feeling.
Yeah.
So it's just like,
yeah. And just going back quickly to the whole like the police force and everything. And this, don't worry, I'm not going on an anti-police rant or anything here. But when we live in a world with rules, but one whose rules are enforced by who? Fallen human beings. And I love where, this scene is played out in the movie after the Joker makes his declaration that if Coleman Reese isn't dead in 60 minutes, then I blow up a hospital. Mm-hmm. When they're transporting Reese, and I think it's Officer Berg who has a wife in the hospital who tries to kill Reese. I just love how you just can't trust anybody in this movie. The only people you feel you can actually trust are Batman, Rachel, Gordon, Fox. You can trust. But like you can't trust anybody on the police force, and it just feels the world just feels very dangerous because you just can't rely. You can't trust anybody, and it's just a really dangerous and unpredictable world that mirrors the Joker's character, and that's throughout this movie. That's his whole philosophy, that everyone has a breaking point. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter how good the world thinks you are, how good you think you are. At some point, his philosophy, at least, is that at some point anybody can break and anybody can be broken down. Is what he does to Harvey Dent, ultimately in the end. And I think it's just a fascinating and more true than we'd like to admit philosophy. And I think it's, like I said, it's why I think this movie stands the test of time and why people keep coming back to it. It's obviously like Heath Ledger's iconic performance is a big part of it. People love his performance, and I love his performance. He's still my favorite Joker to date. But honestly, like his performance would still be, not near as good if the writing wasn't behind it. If he didn't have good writing behind it, because Jared Leto even gave a good performance as the Joker in Suicide Squad. Yeah. But there wasn't. Yeah, see, but there wasn't much to. His character didn't have much to do with it to deal with in that movie. It didn't have much to do.
And so, I'm bummed that we don't get to see more of that version of the Joker, because Jared Leto's Joker was so.
It was. I mean,
good. Heath Ledger's was really good too. I wanted to see more of that as well. But I mean, the fact that we're not going to see more of Jared Leto's because they outed the character in this terrible movie. Just is unfortunate. I do think the tattoos were a bit much for that character, but it was still, I still liked what he was doing because they had him being more of the gangster style of Joker, because Joker, has several different personas. And that's the one thing that's big about the Joker is you never know what you're going to get with him. Are you going to get this goofy guy who's just trying to set up this scary scenario and freak you out, but not actually follow through on anything? Or are you going to get this completely deranged psycho? Or are you going to get the gangster one? Jack Nicholson was very much the gangster Joker, and that's kind of where Jared Leto was going with it. Obviously a little bit more crazy than Jack Nicholson's version, but Heath Ledger's didn't really go as deep into the psycho, but it was definitely on the psycho side of things,
Oh yeah, definitely. But I also want to mention here just the brilliant writing of this antagonist. What makes a great movie is not just creating a good hero, but creating a good antagonist for this hero to battle. And The Dark Knight has one of the best antagonists.
Antagonist is almost more important than the hero.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you don't have enough conflict, then you're just left with a very boring story.
And that's why people can like this movie, because the antagonist is so good, even though the Batman is so terrible.
So we'll get into that. Yep. So the opening scene, I honestly think this movie has one of the best opening scenes of any movie ever made. I love the opening scene. It perfectly sets up the Joker. It perfectly sets up its antagonist. You know right away who you're dealing with, and there's more to come. He's just this double-crossing, twisted mastermind, madman, anarchist, and it just everything. It's not even just a great heist. It's just a great character introduction. One of the best character introductions I've ever seen for a movie. I also just wanted to put a plug in here because there's lots of video essays on this movie, for an essay on YouTube called The Dark Knight Creating the Ultimate Antagonist. And it's by Lessons from the Screenplay. And it really goes into specifically why the Joker is such a good antagonist for Batman in this movie. And I mentioned before, a good thing is to create an opponent who is exceptionally good at attacking your hero's greatest weakness. Because in this movie, the Joker knows Batman's moral code. He knows that he doesn't kill people and he won't kill people. And so he uses that against him throughout this entire movie. He knows that the more chaos he unleashes, the more Batman will want to kill him, to stop everything from happening, but he won't be able to because of his code. And so he essentially makes Batman powerless in this movie. And also he just puts Batman into extremely difficult situations, like putting an ultimatum on for Batman to reveal his true identity. Otherwise, he's going to kill more people. Like that's how you place a character into a box, force them into a corner, and make them have this incredibly difficult situation. Like, what is he going to do? What's he going to choose here? And or just later on, he has to choose the life of Rachel or Harvey Dent when both are tied up around oil drums, ready rigged to blow. He has to choose between two people, which is like another incredibly tough decision. Like, what do you do there? And so ultimately, he chooses Rachel, and it turns out to be Harvey because Joker switched the addresses there, and
twisted, yeah,
because that's what he does. And and another thing to do in a movie is to have your hero and your opponent competing for the same thing in your movie. And in this movie, they're both competing for, essentially, it's the soul of Gotham. That's something that really comes out towards the end. They're really competing for, because the Joker wants complete anarchy, and Batman wants to have law, he wants to have order, he wants to have clean streets. And so they're working for these opposite things, but at the same time, they're working for the soul of Gotham, and only one can come out on top. Mm-hmm. And so whenever you have a hero and a villain battling for the same thing, you're bringing them into constant conflict, and that's just makes for such an engaging and such an entertaining movie. Mm-hmm. Another thing that just makes the Joker so good is that he's, some men just want to watch the world burn. He is a person who is not after money. He's not after any material possession. He literally is just there. He just wants to see chaos and destruction. And those, to me, are the most dangerous kinds of criminals. The ones who aren't even after anything. They just want to see death and destruction. And
it's so good that he had Alfred there to spell everything out for him, because he never would have figured it out on his own.
But I like it. It's disturbing, but it's good. It's really good. And I do think Batman does grow from his experience with the Joker, even though the whole ordeal with this movie, it literally emotionally rips him to shreds. And we see that in the beginning of The Dark Knight Rises, where he literally goes into like witness protection for 8 years because of his ordeal with the Joker in this movie. The Joker really rips him to shreds. So
That's terrible.
I thought you might have something to say about that, but and he ultimately wins and becomes the Dark Knight by not breaking his moral code and taking the fall for Dent's crime, so that Gotham does not lose hope.
Except he doesn't become the Dark Knight. He quits being Batman.
He's still Batman. He's still Batman. He's just Batman in hiding temporarily until the third movie, because his journey's not over yet. There's still another film here, which I'm not going to get into, but The Dark Knight Rises, not as good of a movie as The Dark Knight, but still, I still do like that one as well. But he becomes the Dark Knight in this movie by taking that fall for Dent and giving people hope, even though it isn't a lie, and he pays for that in The Dark Knight Rises. But for the sake of the people, he does that. So other little things I had was just that I just have to mention some of these practical effects. Blowing up an actual building, blowing up a hospital, blowing up an actual building for the hospital. Epic. Things that you just don't see in superhero movies nowadays. That stunt today is a complete CGI shot. You're not blowing up an actual building today for a shot, for a 30-second, not even 30-second shot, for like a 25-second shot maybe. You just don't see that today. And the fact that they actually did that just still
Well,
blows my mind that they
I
actually did that.
love the fact that Heath Ledger just stayed in character when the
Oh yeah,
pyrotechnics went wrong.
that's
Because
the
that's the
thing.
thing is they only had one shot to do
Well,
that thing, and they have the shot, and the things stop exploding in the middle of it because there's actually like something going wrong. They're not actually exploding the way it's supposed to explode. So he stays in character and just starts like monkeying with the thing. And that's like that shows how committed he was to that character and how well he did
well,
with it.
I may blow your mind here, but that is actually a misconception of what actually happened.
Really?
And
I thought it was exactly what happened.
That's what I initially thought too. Then a couple years, I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago, because I watched the bonus stuff for this, for the movie. And so what happened was they actually had a planned pause essentially between the initial explosion and the second explosion. So the pause that happens was supposed to happen in the movie, and it was supposed to happen that way so that Heath could basically walk out with things starting to explode behind him, and then he was supposed to act like, okay, so what's going on here? But Heath doing that, raising his hands and pushing the button, like that was Heath, but still, it was planned that there was going to be a pause between the first explosion and the second. Yeah, but still,
so Heath's stuff was
way,
improvised, but the explosions weren't.
Right, the explosions that was all meticulously all planned because this was obviously a one-shot thing, so they had to get it perfect.
Yeah, makes sense.
So yeah, but still having him walk out of a building that's rigged to explode and is literally exploding behind him, and even Nolan mentioned in the commentary like him not looking back on things that are exploding behind him because he still got debris apparently in his hair and everything when this was happening. He still never looked back whenever he was walking towards the bus, and it's just dedication. Just great acting from Heath Ledger in this movie is just it's so good. And yeah, the hospital explosion is fantastic. There's helicopters flying through the actual city. They blew up a car, the judge's car. They actually blew up that car. I like that. The semi truck flip is incredible. They actually did that stunt. I just things that you just would not. You just would not see.
Where you can actually see the rig on it too.
You can. If you look,
annoys me.
It is. That does kind of bother me just a little bit, but I mean, it's still a great stunt, I think.
Well, to me, that's the point where you use CGI to hide something like that. But
they did remove the actual. If you look at the actual original footage, they did CGI digitally remove the piston. They just didn't really reveal the smoke that came from the piston for some reason. So you can still see like the trail end of the smoke underneath the truck from where it actually lifted it. But they did actually digitally remove like an 8-foot piston that they used to launch the truck. So they did use some digital.
So they tried
removal there, yeah, and and also I also have to mention this was the first movie that started using IMAX cameras for actually filming. Like before, IMAX cameras before this were used for documentaries, but they certainly weren't used in superhero films, and they weren't used for any movies, actually, from what I understand. This was the first movie that really pioneered using IMAX cameras for actual movies, not documentaries. Is this
the movie where they destroyed one, or was that
they did?
Dark Knight Rises? It was this one.
They destroyed one of the 4 at the time. There were only 4 IMAX cameras in the world, and they destroyed one of them in this movie. So that just kind of shows you this was the very novel thing they were doing, and IMAX cameras were a rarity. And yes, they destroyed one of the 4.
That's the thing that people don't get about the camera equipment sometimes is the fact that these studios don't actually own the equipment. A lot of the equipment is like stored in these big equipment houses, and they rent it from them. So you can say there's only 4 IMAX cameras because there were only 4 that were ever created at that point, and not everybody got to use it whenever they wanted.
Right.
So it's just like this is one of the rare things that people don't always know about movie making is the fact that. Like those cameras it's not like every studio owns all their own equipment to make everything, they rent it out.
Exactly. Then I just wanted to mention that lastly, like the cinematography of this movie, especially during the Batman Joker interrogation scene, it involves camera angles and camera moves that really subtly communicate the power struggle between Batman and the Joker, just with eye line level and how it actually, the camera actually crosses the 180 degree line. And moves between the characters and also plays with screen direction, which if anyone's kind of unfamiliar with what screen direction is, normally like the good person or the hero is placed on the left side of the frame and the antagonist is on the right side of the frame. And in this interrogation scene, no one flips them completely throughout the scene to kind of play with the audience of whose side are you actually on here because of their conversation. It just works. It works so well just on just a really subtle level, but it's so well shot in this movie. There's motivated lighting. There's with Harvey Dent turning into Two-Face with the half lighting for whenever he turns and everything. And I wanted to put a quick plug here for another.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say Two-Face is like. This is my favorite version of Two-Face.
Okay.
They had that version in the 90s with Tommy Lee Jones, but then the cartoons and all sorts of things. The reason I really like Two-Face in this one is because it makes the most sense for the character. A lot of people don't know that Harvey Dent and Bruce Wayne were actually like friends. You know what I mean? Like they knew each other, went to prep schools and stuff like that together and things like that. In some of their stories, some of them, it's so many different versions. But you have this good guy, Harvey Dent, and the way he just turns and goes crazy in the comics most of the time just doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? So he gets half burned and he just decides, oh, screw it all, I'm going to become a villain. Like it never made sense to me. But whereas in this movie, they have it being like a man being broken down and then he goes on a revenge kick. You know what I mean? Like that all makes sense. Obviously he gets deluded, and loses sight of who he actually wants to get his revenge on because he's trying to go after Gordon and he goes after Gordon's family. And, that's just, obviously villain-esque, but it's to me, the way they handle that character. I'm just glad that because what I thought they were doing, I thought they were setting him up to be the villain in the next movie. I thought they were setting up for another movie. And when they actually deal with the character in this movie all in one sweep, he's basically only in it for 30 minutes and then they kill him off. It was like, that was the best way to handle Two-Face because Two-Face shouldn't, I don't see Harvey Dent becoming this career criminal. I see him becoming someone who does something and then gets thrown into prison. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense for him to have to become a mobster when he was a DA and so much on the good side of things for no reason. He went psycho. It just doesn't work that way. So I really like the way they handled the character in this. And he is like, you can see he's so distraught. He's refusing to take the pain meds, so he's in a lot of pain, and it's driving him psycho. But it just to me the Harvey Dent as a villain in this just works.
That's good because I've heard one of the complaints I've heard against this movie is that they feel Harvey Dent's his characterization into Two-Face is too rushed, but you don't feel that way. So that's good because
No, I don't feel that way. I mean, it can be rushed because you don't get much with the character, but it's a movie. You know what I mean? Like if it was a TV show and they did this to him in 3 episodes, that's rushed. You know what I mean? But it's a movie. It's 2.5, almost 3 hours long. So I don't feel it was rushed. They even showed earlier in the movie when he's interrogating that crazy guy from when Gordon got killed, that he's got this edge that's, doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? So he has that possibility to falter, when Batman confronts him on it and says, hey, you can't be doing this. You're supposed to be the White Knight, don't do this.
Right. Yeah.
So he's trying to pull him back from that point. But I feel like they did it. I feel like they did it well. You know what I mean? Like the man is still in grief from his fiance dying. He's lost everything. He's, got half himself blown up. And this time it was like a more realistic version of obviously the scars are still you know what I mean? It really, you wouldn't be able to walk around like that. The rest of the scars. Yeah. But it was it wasn't like, oh, someone just threw some acid at him or he was standing next to something and it blew up into him. It was like you saw him tip over in the chair. He gets all the gasoline on him and then the fire hits him as they're getting away. And it's like, okay, wow, that actually it was more of a this makes sense kind of injury, rather than just, oh, hey, someone threw acid at him and it just happened to burn half his body in this weird way, it would just
right.
Yeah.
I love that they included that shot of him on the floor with the fuel actually coming. Because you're right. It made perfect sense, and I like that they included that. So I just wanted to lastly just put a little plug in here for another essay. It's called "The Dark Knight - How Does a Camera Tell a Story?" and it's by Nicholas Dobby, and it kind of breaks down that Batman Joker interrogation scene really, really well as far as the cinematography. Definitely, if you're interested, go watch it because it's really, really good, and it just shows you how well that scene is shot.
We're going to be putting in plugs for things that we feel educate us about the movie. I just have to talk about, Pete Holmes' Batman, because they just rip into pretty much every silly thing in the Dark Knight trilogy with that character. It's just a little comedy sketches online. You can just type in to YouTube like Batman, and they come up with jokes about how he came up with his voice and what happens when he meets the characters, or Batman and is not killing people, and they're like, wait, what do you think you're doing to these people when you hit them with those razor sharp things in the head? They got a lot of good jokes in there, and I just think it works well. But so the cons of this movie, since I'm the con side,
you are
I am, and which is weird because I'm such a big Batman fan, so why would it be con against the Dark Knight? And for me, the Dark Knight trilogy is not a strong trilogy. And that's where my whole thing comes in, is I don't like the trilogy overall as a good Batman story. And my problem pretty much comes down to the way they characterize Batman. Dark Knight itself is a strong film. The cinematography is beautiful. They do have a nice, pretty well put together story. I mean, there are some crazy plot holes in here, which are just, I don't know if it's like editing room floor or what, like certain things that happen just don't make sense. Like at the party, how did Batman sneak up on Joker? And why did he wait so long while he's there holding Rachel's, with a knife to her face? I mean? It's just like, did he wait until he got the right cue to make a punchline? Like what's going on there?
Maybe he just didn't get down there before then, and he is Batman. He's, so he comes out of nowhere all the time.
He comes out of nowhere all the time, but it says he's suddenly next to him. And it seems more like he should have been jumping out of the crowd somewhere or something like that, And then there's the other thing in that where he jumps off the edge of the film, on the edge of the building to save Rachel. And then they just cut to something else. It's like, wait, Joker was still up in that building with all those people. Like, they never talk about the fact that Joker's still up in this building with a whole bunch of villains and a whole bunch of innocent people. Batman doesn't even seem to care. It's just weird. Like he's making his jokes with Rachel or whatever. It's like, dude, the guy should be like, okay, she's safe. Let me get my thing back up there and go and deal with him, Even if they did just a shot of him like, okay, she's safe. He goes back up there. Joker's gone. You know what I mean? And he left the place. That would have been something,
Right.
So it seems to me like there might be something on a cutting room floor somewhere, maybe like he looks up and the Joker's driving off. Cause I know somebody said in the novelization that that after he lands on the ground with Rachel, they see Joker getting into their vehicles and they drive off,
Yeah.
So maybe there's something there. Maybe there's not. I don't know. It just seems like something missing. And then with Kyle Reese. Why?
Coleman Reese, yeah.
Coleman Reese, that's it. Kyle Reese is Terminator.
That's Terminator, yep.
Yeah. But with the Coleman Reese guy, why did the police move him? Like, all they had to do was defend him for an hour where he was. Why did they put him in a car and drive him throughout the city where basically they make him an easier target? Like, more people get access to this guy to hurt him because the police are moving him. Whereas if they had just kept him in that studio, locked away, barricading himself in, I don't know. It just seems a bit contrived. I feel like there's a strong amount of plot armor around this movie that they just don't let certain things go wrong when it's like, I don't know. But back to the character of Batman.
Yeah, of Batman.
It begins with Batman Begins, which I kind of let things go because it's an origin story and it's this first outing. You know what I mean? Obviously, he's not the polished Batman in that movie.
Right.
Now it's a year later, or only a year later, you could say. So he's not as good, maybe, but still it's a year later. And then you have The Dark Knight Rises, which takes place 8 years later. Batman's arc in this whole story, to me, is just one that's very weak. Because he literally gives up after this movie, as I was saying before. He goes into hiding, but Batman having to run from the police isn't necessarily a bad thing. How does he overcome and still be Batman while he's running from police as well? Batman's been in those situations before, It's not always I get to work with police, I have Commissioner Gordon in my pocket. The reality is he might still actually have been able to get intel from Commissioner Gordon because he knows that he's not actually the villain. He knows he's not this bad guy, Could he have cleared his name enough with the public? It almost doesn't even make sense that, why did he kill this DA for no reason? It's just a weird twist on it. I think him giving up for those 8 years is what really made it like, oh, come on. What are you doing with this guy? You know what I mean? If they had him try and continue for a few years, maybe have it be 20 years in the future, which I know would have been more difficult. But it just seems like he gave up so quickly to me.
See, I also view it as not as much as giving up, but the fact that he also lost Rachel in this movie, who meant, was meant a lot to him, as much to him really as what she meant to Harvey, what Harvey Dent, how he felt about her in the same way. So it was a combination of losing Rachel in this movie and the combination of the effects of the Joker that had on him, that I viewed him kind of going out and being a recluse for almost a decade before having the pull from the push from Alfred to really get back in it, to once Bane started showing up.
But that to me makes him not actually have the fortitude, not be able to be the symbol that he's supposed to be trying to be, like I'm the hero they deserve, or I'm the hero that they have instead of the hero they deserve or something like that. Like, I don't know. It's just.
But I think that makes him more human, though. At the same time, wouldn't you say? It makes him
human to a point where why would we call him a superhero then? You know what I mean? Because that's to me, the point is he's supposed to be able to overcome this because of the fact that he has the mask, because he's hiding behind the Batman persona. I would think it'd be more of a thing of, because Batman has lost people before in the comics. He's lost 2 Robins. That he does go crazy. He does go out on the edge, but he takes it out on the criminals then. You know what I mean? He's not wallowing away, letting everything fall apart, letting the like his business falls apart too. Like they take him and just make him such a, like, sure, mourn, sure. Have him have taken a year or 2 off, maybe. But a decade? I mean, come on. The guy had put so much work into this. That if he hadn't put so much work into becoming Batman, being separated from Rachel, you know what I mean? Like, he spent 7-8 years becoming Batman.
Right.
And then he gives up after a year, after things get tough a little bit. To me, I just don't think that doesn't.
Yeah.
That's just not Batman,
I mean, we're also supposed to assume that after this movie, things were a lot better in Gotham than what they were beforehand, because the criminals were off the streets because of Harvey's name was upheld. So the criminals stayed off the streets, and relatively, not that there was no crime.
Well, no, what they cover there is that they had sweeping legislation that allowed the cops to basically do all sorts of horrible, horrible stuff. Like, forget Batman. Now the cops were able to just do these horrible investigations and push things through and come down with an iron fist. That's the other thing, is like what they allude to is basically what would technically be a more dystopian feeling in Gotham. Sure, people may feel better. They may be the authority using it for good. But what happens when that authority turns on the regular people? It doesn't. That's the thing about authoritarian type regimes, is they don't end up only going after the bad guys. They clean up the bad guys first, but then they got to keep doing things to keep their rule. And there's a reason why Commissioner Gordon wants to reveal the truth to everybody in the third movie. And I don't know what it is. We don't really know exactly what all the legislation was, but we do know that once it's revealed that this legislation in the name of Harvey Dent was perpetrated on a lie, that a lot of people feel like the cases should fall apart. They built a whole new prison system because of what they did with Harvey Dent. They were able to house more criminals because they needed to house more criminals. I mean, sure, it's Gotham. Maybe they do need to, but to me, that just says a lot more about the American prison system than it says about like the character of Gotham. At least with Batman there, the criminals were deciding to not do things. They were having to change their ways a bit. They weren't just all being locked up and throw away the key type thing. You know what I mean? Like, Bane comes in and he's practically almost a hero to the people because of what's been going on in Gotham for the past 8 years or whatever. They even talk about it being a reckoning in that movie to get back for what has happened. But so, yeah, I don't like that. I don't like, so Batman, the character arc bothers me. The other thing that bothers me about him is I just feel like Batman is supposed to be the world's greatest detective. He's supposed to be this guy who basically like hyper observant, picks up on things that other people don't pick up on, be able to figure things out ahead of time. Yeah, so he's supposed to be the world's greatest detective. He's supposed to be someone who hyper observant, notices things and figures things out. He's supposed to be really intelligent. It's one of those things where he's able to figure things out, at least in the comics, almost as quickly as Superman. You know what I mean? Like, Superman's supposed to be super intelligent. Batman's almost near equal with that. And it's, I just don't feel like Christian Bale plays that very well. I feel like he ends up being so dumb in his movies that he doesn't figure anything out until it's literally spelled out for him. The joke I make is that he doesn't figure out who the villain is until she's stabbing him with a knife and twisting it in his side. And that's when he goes, oh, this girl I've been sleeping with is actually Talia al Ghul and wants to kill me. That's the thing about this. He's supposed to be one step ahead, or at least have a clue of what's actually going on. And that's another thing I didn't like about The Dark Knight Rises. So yeah, The Dark Knight is the strongest of the three. But my problem is with the whole trilogy and the overarching story is they once again did Bane dirty. They set it up as if they were actually doing Bane well, but at the end of the movie, he turned out to just be someone else's henchman again. And it was like, no, Bane is literally known as the man who broke the bat. Because the whole thing about Bane is that he is as much of a foil to Batman as the Joker is, but in a different way. Because Bane is just as strategic, just as intelligent. The thing that Bane has on Batman is super strength. He's got this stuff flowing through his veins, this venom that he uses to beat Batman. And when he did that in the comics, the Bruce Wayne literally went out and stopped being Batman for like over a year's time, I think, in the comic books. It was early 90s, so I wasn't actually reading at that point. But he gets somebody else to put on the Batman suit and go out and be Batman. He actually hires a guy who's like got military training and stuff like that to be Batman. And, that goes off in its own whole other story. But Bane is supposed to be, I was like so excited for Tom Hardy playing Bane, and he did so well with the character until they kind of like, at the end, Bane just kind of twists into this dummy henchman.
I never really liked how he's killed. He's literally just shot, and that's it. That's it. That's the end. Yeah, I've never been a fan of that.
I mean, it's better than the 90s version. The 90s film was terrible. They just made him like this brute monster, and he wasn't actually in control of his senses. But in this one, he was at least intelligent. He was at least able to come up with schemes and stuff like that. And he gave Batman a run for his money. He took over Gotham. He cut them off from the rest of the world. It was terrifying, but
he's a terrorist, and he did break his back.
And he did break his back, and threw him into that pit and stuff like that. But they just like at the end of the movie, like, oh wait, no, he's not actually the bad guy. He's just been this henchman. And I really feel like they just twisted the character at that point and made him be like, oh no, I'm not really smart anymore. I'm just this dummy guy. And he just, like you said, he just gets shot and dies. Yeah. It's like, come on, there's better ways to have handled Bane.
Right.
So there's the plot holes. There's the fact that I don't really like how the arc goes for Batman in the story. I just feel like he gives up too quickly, too easily. Because that's like supposed to be his thing. He's supposed to be similar to like Peter Parker in the fact that he doesn't give up. No matter how much terrible stuff happens to him, no matter how many bad things happen, he pushes through and he perseveres. He loses people close to him, but in this one, when it happens, he just kind of like, I can't handle it. I'm going to just close up everything, and I'm going to lose my business, lose my billions, not support the orphans. I'm just going to like let everything go to crap. And that to me is just like, then they made him an invalid and he needed some special thing. And that's, they just fix things too easily sometimes. Oh yeah, just put this mechanical thing on his leg, and now we're never going to talk about through the rest of the movie that he has a bad knee. Whereas there could have been an epic fight with Bane there towards the end of the movie where Bane just like, punches the knee, they make something of it,
Right. But they do have that epic climb from the pit, that epic scene. That's a great scene. And that was epic in theaters. I saw it three times in theaters.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's Dark Knight Rises. This is, still Dark Knight.
Still Dark Knight, yes. So, like I said, my problems aren't as much with the Dark Knight movie, although I do find there to be certain things. I feel like the cracks are there, but they're not as obvious, because, but they lead into the next movie. So the fact that they're there does exploit that. Let me think. What else was there? Other than that, I don't know. Commissioner Gordon became a little more unhinged than I expected him to be. I remember like when he's like, no, I need to save Harvey Dent. He's getting all like rah about that. And it's like, I don't know. It's just like for him to have become, before his family was taken, for him to be that unhinged was a little like, I don't know. That seems a little weird. And the death thing, why did he have to pretend to die to do what he did? Like, I don't get why he had to pretend to die to protect his family, they say. But to me, it's just like, it's all these little things where it's just like, could you not commit to the kill of Commissioner Gordon? Because when they did that, I was shocked. You know what I mean? But then they undid it so quickly. It was just like one of these things where it's like, oh, I don't know, man. That's just, if you're trying to make it more grounded, more real, then do that. But if you're not, then who cares? Like, and no, like, why didn't the Russian ballet not notice Bruce Wayne was gone from that boat? And none of them said anything. Like, there's just so many little things like that where it's just like,
wait, who didn't?
That's
notice?
just another random thing like he gets this alibi of taking the Russian ballet, all of them, off on this yacht, but then they literally see him jump off the boat and swim over to a plane and get on a plane and fly away. It's like, that's a little too obvious, like maybe have him take the bat sub or something out of the bottom of the yacht to get away from them and they don't see him actually escape. I don't know. It just seems to me like it was too, like I said, there's just this weird plot armor where nothing goes wrong. I mean, they leave that phone in the building,
Right.
the
In Hong
sonar
Kong.
phone. So
Yeah.
they leave that in there. They don't retrieve it. So now they've left this crazy technology in the hands of a technology company that they know is villainous.
Yeah. Maybe, I mean, maybe they on the, yeah, I don't know. I was going to say maybe on the way out they got it, but yeah.
It's just like these little detail things that it just bugs me. And maybe it's because I'm such a Batman fan that I'm being too hard on the Batman movies. Because I do like, I like Ben Affleck's Batman, but, maybe that's, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. You do bring up some good points. I think it's just, yeah, they are very, since they are very like, I would say deeper down, like people like most people just wouldn't notice those because of how good everything other areas and other elements are.
Yeah. And like I said, the villain was very good in this movie, and Heath Ledger does play a really good Joker. Never going to take that away from him. It's a solid performance. It's a creepy character. I wish we'd gotten to see more of it, but
I know. I think I read a couple of years ago, like they were planning to have him in another, like the third movie, if that was their original intent.
The third movie was completely different because he died. They would have had a completely different role with that. Joker is actually, get this, my least favorite Batman villain.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's because he's overdone. He comes back every other year at least in the comics, so every time he shows up and you never know what you're going to get. And to me, I'm at the point where I just feel like Batman is, at least in the comics, in this movie, I get what he's doing here, but in the comics, he's negligent for not killing him. And I know Batman's not supposed to kill,
right?
But there's literally, like when they did the New 52, which was like 2010-ish time is when they rebooted things. Batman literally has a comic where he's starting, I think it's actually the Dark Knight comic. He goes 542 murders. I have proof of 542 murders that he's done. And he like lists all these things that he knows Joker has done. And I'm looking at it going, okay, so you know all this, but you don't kill him because why? Why? At this point, he's proven that he's not going to recover. You are negligent. You are wrong to not take that man out. And I know people say, oh, but then he's just going to be as bad as the Joker then. No, there is an element of justice in taking evil out of the world. And if they're not going to do it, then maybe he should. The man is not crazy like and I love that part in with Joker's character in this movie where he's crazy. He's like, I'm not, because he's not actually crazy. Mm-hmm. He's not a crazy person. He's a psychopath.
Yeah.
But he's
right about a lot of things.
But he's got a lot of thought in his stuff, and it's not something you're going to recover from. Yeah. Most of the doctors who try to get him to recover from stuff end up converting into his thing and becoming villains. Harley Quinn is one of them. She was a psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum who he turns into a villain. Mm-hmm. So it's just this thing where, no, Joker needs to die. Batman needs to kill him. And it should have been done by now.
Yeah.
So at least in the comics, I think that's true. But obviously this movie, it's the Joker's first time out. He's doing bad things, but if you can contain him, lock him up, then go that route. But nah, they're at this point, Joker just needs to go away. I'm tired of the villain, at least in the comic books and the story. It's overdone.
Yeah.
There's not really much new you can do with the character. The latest thing they did was they revealed that he's actually 3 different people. That's probably not even the latest thing, but but this was a while ago, and I didn't even read these comics, but they revealed that the Joker is actually 3 different people, and that's why you never know what you're going to get with him. is because that when
Okay.
he shows up, it's a different person. That's also why he's able to do so much and be in so many different places at the same time, is because there's 3 of him. And I just think it's grasping at straws at this point to come up with original stories for the character that is just so overdone when they can just come on. There's plenty of new characters. There's plenty of new people to do.
Here's a question here's
it.
a question that's asked sometimes about the Joker, especially in this movie. Do you think everything that he does in this movie, has he planned it all out months in advance, or does he kind of make it up as he goes along type of thing?
You see, I think he wants you to think that he's making it up as it goes along, but there's too much stuff going on. Too many things. And that's actually another thing, is his plans are so big, there's no way they could ever actually come to fruition. Like, he wanted to get captured to get Lau. Is that what his name was? The accountant guy. He wanted to get Lau.
Yeah.
So he wanted to get captured, but the entire time he's not. What if he didn't get captured? Like, what if his plan had worked? What if he had blown up Batman? What if Batman didn't have that thing on his mask that shocked him when he went to take the mask off? You know what I mean? Like, what if he had actually succeeded and killed the Batman? Or what if Harvey Dent actually was the Batman and he killed Harvey Dent? You know what I mean? Like, his plans. So there's an element where, yeah, he can't really plan this out. But clearly he did, because his whole plan was to get captured and use that bomb thing to get Lau. And then at the end with the boats, how did he know that they were going to put prisoners on one boat and other people on the other boat? Like,
see, that's where I attribute it to the fact that he just has his mob. Like, he has people on the inside. I just kind of interpret he has people on the inside of almost anything in the city.
That would make sense for the mob. That would make sense for Lex Luthor. That would make sense for so many other villains, but not the Joker. You know what I mean? The Joker runs around with maybe 5 or 6 guys who are just crazy and want something to do. You know what I mean? But it doesn't make sense that he has access to these guys on the inside to put all those barrels down in the bottom of these boats and just hope that they put criminals on one of them. Because the cops, he doesn't have anyone on his side. He has just a couple of guys. The mob wants him gone. The police want him gone. Batman wants him gone. The Joker has a small group of guys in this movie that are going along with everything he does, you know, and hoping that he doesn't choose them to be killed in a fight against a couple other guys with him.
And he definitely uses money as a motivator, like, and everything. Yeah. But I mean, like, I will say that the ferry scene in the end of this movie, I kind of go back to what I said earlier. This is one of the most suspenseful climax scenes in a movie, because you genuinely don't know what's going to happen, because he could have easily, one of the ferries could have blown the other one up, or vice versa, or he could have blown both of them up. You don't know what's going to happen, and it's a very suspenseful scene. I love it.
It is a good scene. I do like that they have the juxtaposing of the characters of, you know, the guy who's all talk saying, oh, well, no one else wants to get their hands dirty, then I'll do it. And, you know, and he just can't actually bring himself to do it when he thinks about the fact that he's doing it.
Yes. The moral dilemma that he has, like, yeah.
I'm just wondering if that would actually happen, though, because...
I mean, that's something I was looking. I was like, what if this happened in real life? What do you think would actually happen? Do you think one of them would blow the other one up in today's world?
Yeah, I do. And here's why. Because they did experiments back in the 60s or 70s to try and figure out why people went along with Nazis. You know, because Nazis, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, that it wasn't just, you know, people who were part of the SS and all the stuff there. It was normal, regular policemen who they somehow got to go out and just mow down Jews in the thousands and thousands and thousands at a time. You know, and they just sent them to town. And when that wasn't fast enough, they sent them there to collect them, throw them onto trains, and then they started gassing them. So they got these guys, normal policemen, from these countries, from Poland, Polish policemen did this, you know? So why? And one of the things they came up with was it was easier when they were separated from it. So the policemen had trouble with the actual shooting part, doing the executions, but they didn't have any problem rounding them up and letting the SS come in and mow them down. They seemed to be okay with that. And then they discovered that when they separated them even more, they put them on trains, they send them away to know that they know they're going to get killed, but they seem to be more okay with that.
To it. Yeah.
So the further separated they got, there was these experiments, I forget what they're called, but they were done in like the 60s or 70s, where they basically had participants in this experiment be told that there was a bunch of buttons in front of them, and each button was higher levels of shocking that they were going to do to a participant in this experiment. They thought this person was also a volunteer. It was actually an actor. They were just pretending to be shocked, so they weren't actually getting shocked. But there was a scientist there telling them to shock the person and to continue doing it, and then pushing them more and more and more to shock the person until, if they went all the way through it, the person would get killed, So then this participant in the thing would think that they killed someone. And they found that when they had to grab the person and put their hand on the shocking thing, 60 to 70% of the time they would stop. They'd be like, no, I can't keep doing this, When they just had to push the buttons, though, they would do it more. I don't remember the exact percentage. But what they found, and this was the disturbing thing, was when the person, then the third part of the experiment, the person was behind, they could see him on the other side of glass, but they weren't in the room with them, and they could see them and they could hear them screaming and struggling. And they would go further in the experiment with them. Okay. And then there was another level to it where they could only hear the person. They couldn't see them. They were in another room, and they could hear the person screaming for help. When they could only hear the person screaming for help, they killed them 70% of the time. They went that far with the experiment. Yeah. Whereas, and they had, I think it was 4 times, they could object 4 times. They say, no, I can't do this. And then the scientist would say, the experiment must go on. Okay. And then they would keep pushing it. But if they objected a 5th time, the experiment stopped. Okay. So they could stop the experiment. They could actually get to a point where, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing it. And they didn't do it enough. Like, people shocked them to a point of torture way more than anyone expected, just because there was a person in a white coat telling them to do it. And because they were separated from them, because they wouldn't do it if they had to do it themselves. But if they were separated from them by a certain degree, they were more willing to do this. And that's why I think the boat scene would have ended with probably the regular people just turning the key and blowing up the prisoners, because it's just prisoners, in their mind. They wouldn't be thinking about the guards on there who have families and stuff like that. They'd just be like, no, we're killing the murderers. And they wouldn't have a problem with it. I think they would actually do it. Yeah.
It's a great social experiment, as the Joker calls it. It's
terrifying social experiment.
It's terrifying. Yes. It's so effective. And
I mean, honestly, and it speaks to what's going on today, where people want to force people to do stuff that they don't want to do. They want to force people to get a vaccine. I think 80% of the country is okay with saying, no, everyone has to get this jab. Everyone has to get a passport to be able to do anything. And boom, that's it. And that's terrifying, because that's such an infringement on our rights. They've dissolved so much to a point now where somebody sent me a meme today where they said, it was a picture of George Washington. He says, me and my friends would have been dropping bodies by now, or something like that, And I know it sounds like so casual to say, but I honestly think people don't realize over the past, 200 plus years of American history, we've lost so many of these rights that they established at the beginning, to a point where we're not what they had planned anymore,
Yeah.
Like the idea that they want to force people to inject something into their bodies to get something, to fight a disease that we don't even fully know yet, that's mutating and changing to a point where it's affecting more people now this year than it did last year. Why shouldn't it be dying off? They already know the original COVID-19 is endemic, which means the more we're exposed to it, the weaker it gets to us. We become stronger against it. They know that now. So why is it coming back, these strong mutant strains that are just I mean, yeah, that's what viruses do. They change, but it's, I don't know. It's just so,
Yeah.
it's this fine line between freedom and rights and public safety. And I get why it's such a struggle. It's not an easy thing to do, but I just feel like if you're against the side of freedom, then you're probably on the wrong side. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Get the vaccine or not, I don't care. It's up to you. You know, I don't think we should be forcing anyone to do it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd agree with you. Yep.
That's just my 2 cents. We are way over time.
Yeah, we are.
I guess that's kind of expected with a Batman movie.
With this one, yeah. I only have like 2 things of trivia. One of them I just had was that with Heath Ledger portraying the Joker, that he was the original choice from Nolan to play the Joker all along. He wanted Ledger to play it. He actually met Ledger back in 2005 during, or I guess it would have been 2004 during the Batman Begins casting process. Because I think Ledger auditioned for Bruce Wayne, and Nolan, didn't think he was right for the part, and Heath eventually agreed. But he kept, Heath in mind for the sequel. And when Joker came into, they were writing the Joker, he's like, yes, I want Heath for that. And we all know, most people know this, that Heath Ledger, he hid away, basically locked himself in a motel room for about 6 weeks to kind of get into character and develop the voice and every tick of the character, and it really shows on screen. It's just,
I don't see Heath Ledger in this character at all. Like,
no, he's unrecognizable. Like there's sometimes I just want to see him without the makeup on, because I don't see Heath underneath that. The voice isn't there. The mannerisms are completely different from anything that, if you ever watch Ledger in any other movies, it's all different. And
he's in one of my favorite movies. He's in The Patriot, and The Knight's Tale has always been a fun one for me. Like, it's not like, oh, it's a great film, but it's fun to watch. And he's
you just can't believe that's him. No, and that's when it's such a great performance, when you don't even recognize the person.
This role actually cost him his life. Do you think this role is what did it, or was he already a troubled person before this?
Well,
because I know I've done a lot of
I've done a lot of research on this. I definitely think it played a factor, because of the fact that going into this, apparently he had trouble with insomnia before even getting, casting in this movie, being casted. So he already had trouble sleeping. And because he got in so deep with this role, into this role, and studying the character, and he based the Joker off of Alex DeLarge, from A Clockwork Orange, which is, I have never seen the film, but it's a very dark, psychotic film. And, he got really down deep into this, and he just could not sleep at all. So he was taking these mixtures of sleeping pills and it was a deadly combination. I forget what they were, but it was a deadly combination that he took, and he was taking, and that ultimately is what caused it. But this role it certainly did not help him at all and I definitely think it was a tipping point for him, because he just couldn't sleep, and he needed these pills to be able to sleep and to work. And eventually he ended up taking the wrong combination of things. And so, that's kind of where I fall on it, that I do think it played a factor in it. I do.
Yeah. It's just so sad to see such a good actor. Like, he's young too.
He was 28. He was 20. Yeah, I think 28. Okay. He was a great actor. I would have loved to see where he would have gone from here. He obviously, they were planning to do a third Batman film with him in it, and I would have loved to see more of his Joker in it. And unfortunately, like, he never even got to see his own performance. That's what's sad too. Like, he had just finished filming, so he got all of his scenes in, but they were editing, and he didn't even get to see his final performance on screen. So I think that's even heartbreaking in its own way.
Yeah.
So,
do you know if there's any truth to Jack Nicholson telling him not to take the role?
I have heard that. I don't know if there's any like truth to that. I haven't found either way, whether it's true or not.
because Jack Nicholson didn't seem to play as crazy of a version of the character.
He was definitely not as dark and psychotic as Ledger's.
So it's just like, I don't know if maybe the source material bothered him to a certain extent, because there were plenty of crazy Batman stories out by that point, you know, in the early 89 it was. Yeah, there was plenty of psycho Joker stuff by that point that Jack Nicholson could have been disturbed by the character himself, you know, but he didn't play that crazy of a version of him. He played kind of a lighter version of him, not as light as obviously the 60s, but Jack Nicholson's version was, they even tied him back to being the guy who actually killed Bruce Wayne's parents. You know what I mean? They made that connection in the movie to make the payoff of him fighting Batman even more, you know, like it's just this weird thing that they did that just doesn't, I don't know. Yeah. Just doesn't make sense, but
yeah, I definitely think it was a factor in it. He got really down deep into the role, and
so sad.
It's very sad. 28 years old, had a lot of head ahead of him, and taken too soon. But
I mean, I remember
still get.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I just remember after having seen this movie the first time I saw it in theaters with a bunch of people. It was me, my brother, and our friend Caleb. And we walked out of that movie like just kind of disturbed because it was really chilling, you know, like this version of the Joker, the fact
he's
that
holding
everything surrounding it. It's just like, wow, this is actually a very, it was one of the few times when I actually was like, maybe not few times, maybe one of the first times where I was just like, where it struck a deep chord of just like, whoa, this movie's kind of shaking me a bit, you know? Now, not so much. It's so casual and I've seen it so many times, but.
Right. Well, when you see him holding a knife to Rachel and the camera is spinning around them 360 and you have Hans Zimmer's music in there with that violin kicking in, like it is very...
building. That was one of the sound mixing things that I remember being like, oh my God, this is so intense because I had my headphones on, and I don't think I remember that same feeling as intense having watched it on my TV and stuff like that before, because I don't have like a surround sound system or anything. But when I had the headphones on, when I saw it in the theater, I remember so chilling. She didn't see him in his makeup beforehand either. Neither did Michael Caine. Michael Caine, when he walks in at that point, got struck speechless because he had not seen Heath Ledger.
Yes, I read that. That's... Yeah, and I heard that he very much isolated himself on set. Like he didn't really talk to a lot of people on set. Like he tried to stay in character while on set. Like he was a very, what's the word? He was a very
method actor.
Very, very much a method actor. So, but that is The Dark Knight. That is our
season finale.
Season 3 finale. Season 3 finale. We are planning another season. We got
the Christmas specials coming up first.
Christmas specials,
and then season 4 will probably, I don't want to say January, February at the latest, but
somewhere around there. But thank you. I want to thank you so much for listening to us this season and being such faithful listeners to us, and leave us our thoughts in the comments, what you think of this movie. And we always appreciate your feedback. And
stay cool.
Stay cool. See you next season. Thanks for watching this episode of Buddy Movies. If you like what you saw, you can click up here for more episodes. And remember to like, share, and subscribe to get the access to all of our latest episodes. And if you really like what you see, you can support us on patreon.com/buddymovies. Thanks for watching, and stay cool.